and that would be the internet. I feel this is the best place at the moment to do the kind of trans research I want to do, because the internet is one place where you consistently have trans community, and I'm going to have to factor this into my results. Not everyone can access the internet. Often the younger population find it easier, and you might have different populations in different places. But I did a pilot study just of gender variance more generally on a blog called genderfork.com, which you may have heard of. If you haven't, it's wonderful. I did a study on there and I found out I had huge amounts of data which I do loads of wonderful things with. I'm currently writing lots of papers which are all getting rejected, or everyone says, this is brilliant, submit it to a different journal. But I'll get there in the end. And so I haven't decided whether I'm going to do my health research on a message board or a blog, but my plan is to find a community based on various complicated sociological factors, and then decide to study it. There's all kinds of complex ethical issues there, which I'll get onto that. But the idea is to see what people are saying about themselves, to see what people are saying about the treatment they're receiving, to say how they're treated by their doctor. The idea is the internet is great because it's interactive, and also it allows people, rather than an artificial environment where I sit people down and give them a sort of inquisition and say, so tell me about your life, people are already talking about their lives. And that's why the internet is wonderful for sociological research. And there can be a million presentations on wonderful things and bad things and issues of internet research, which I don't have time for. I also want to do a focus group. A focus group, for those who aren't in the know, is pretty much, it's like a sociological interview, except you get loads of people, you sit them in a room together and get them chatting, and then you kind of chat with them and you see how they feel about stuff. So in a sense, analysing the message board is like having a gigantic focus group. But I want to have a specific focus group simply because having been to a message board and found some things out, and got some data and got some ideas, oh, I think this seems to be happening to people. I want to say to people, I found this, what do you think? You know, does this relate to your experiences? How does it relate to your experiences? The idea is something called triangulation, which I mentioned before, which basically means you check your data against some other data and see whether it all seems to work. Participants might raise issues I've missed. It's reflexive, which basically means you're looking at yourself and going, am I doing the right thing? Which I think is a wonderful idea that's come from feminism. Each time you go and research something, you go, well, I better be aware of who I am, where I'm coming from, how, for instance, in my case, I'm white, I'm middle class, how does that affect my perspective, how does that affect where I'm coming from? And it's an opportunity to share some initial results with people and say, I'm kind of talking about you. Is that okay? What do you think about it? Do I do the focus group online or offline? I haven't yet worked it out. I kind of like the idea of having everyone in a room. It's kind of nice. So, the role of the internet itself. Why the internet? The internet is massively important for trans community. And there's all these publications talked about it in the 1990s, and there hasn't been much since, which is strange because I read all of that and I think, oh, all these amazing things have happened since. But so many people come out online, meet people online, meet other trans people online, find out about events. We pretty much organised this conference on the internet. It's incredible. Some people posted angry blogs. Some other people started saying, let's have a protest. The next thing you know, there's a Facebook group and there's a blog, and it was incredible. The internet, wonderful. But in addition to that, the internet's changed the nature of trans community. Whittle has a hilariously titled paper called The Trans-Siberian Mailway, which I quote at every possible opportunity just because I think it's really, really funny. And that's about trans message groups who were in the 1990s of the kind that don't really exist. But in the exciting sociological law language, Whittle talked about new modes and different codes, by which, as far as I'm aware, what he means by that is that there were new ways of expressing the self, everything became a bit more fluid, people became more comfortable with the idea of not fitting into easy categories, because everyone who didn't fit into easy categories got to talk to other people who didn't, to go, oh, it's not just me, I don't have to constantly be wandering around thinking I have to be a stereotype, which was fantastic. Stone has a somewhat more wordy book. Sandy Stone, interestingly, is the person who was attacked by Janice Raymond in the Transsexual Empire at length, and wrote another fantastic paper, which was called The Empire Strikes Back, a Transsexual Manifesto. And it's really wordy and quite complicated, but I recommend digging it up. It's a really good laugh. But Stone's in for making really wild statements with dramatic language. And Stone said, in cyberspace, the transgender body is the natural body. And I think what she meant by that was that the trans body in offline space is often seen as strange and deviant. On the internet, it really doesn't matter. And I think that's had an impact on how we see ourselves outside of the internet, which is great. And finally, Leslie Feinberg, wonderful, read everything you can by Leslie Feinberg. You might not agree with it all, but it's good at what it does. Wasn't writing from a terribly serious academic perspective, and is therefore far more easy to read. It said some very interesting things about trans community online in the 1990s, such as the Feinberg argued that gender-neutral pronoun systems, using pronouns such as sie and hier, or a gender-neutral form of they, developed to a great degree online, in that suddenly there was an environment in which people could regularly refer to themselves in different ways. And so what you see here is a shift not just towards a more individual-focused form of understanding, but also a shift towards acknowledging that we don't have to fit within binary categories if we don't want to. I think this is also illustrated in a quote from Whittle's piece, The Trans-Siberian Railway. It's quite lengthy, but I think it's great. Whittle said, look, isn't it really exciting that there's these trans groups and they're finding new ways of encompassing huge amounts of people. And I'm going to read this out because it's rather big. It's from, I've forgotten what it stands for, TMTF. It was trans male something something. But they were an online group. And they had a mission statement, which was quoted to prove his point. Some political action and education groups are promoting transgender as an umbrella term to include transsexuals, transgenderists, cross-dressers, transvestites, and other groups of gender-variant people, such as drag queens and kinks, butch lesbians and mannish or passing women. Some transgender people consider themselves a third sex, neither male nor female, but combining characteristics of both, also called an epicene or third. Most commonly, transgender people live as, identify as, and prefer to be treated as belonging to the opposite sex, but do not wish to change their bodies through surgery. I think I can see what was happening, but I think it's interesting that things have changed. There's a lot of groups that use this kind of statement. There's a lot of groups that say you are either a true transsexual or you're a man in a dress, and FTM spectrum people don't exist. But I find it interesting that a lot of groups have moved beyond this. So in my research I did for my master's degree on gender fork, I found a slightly different mission statement and statements of inclusion. You'll notice it's somewhat shorter. Gender fork is a supportive community for the expression of identities across the gender spectrum. And with a short sentence, you pretty much say everything the previous statement wanted to say, and more. There's no mention of female, there's no mention of male, it's just gender everywhere. It's great, and I love it. You know, I think this shows that there has been discursive evolution, or as you might just say, change, on the internet. And it's happened outside the internet, but the internet's played a huge role in facilitating it. Something else from Gender Fork. A few people seem confused about this, so they had something else in their frequently asked questions. The question was, I'm still learning all this new gender lingo. Can you create a glossary to help me out? The answer was no. But their point was, No one really knows where the language is going. It's still evolving. We don't know what we're talking about. Everyone describes themselves differently. It's always comments about gender pluralism and intersectionality. It's right here when people recognise it, which obviously makes it very hard to study. But I think it's worth giving it a go, because this is what exists.